Yeah.
So firstly, can I welcome you, and our topic today is social entrepreneurship for a better tomorrow. And I think in that context, we see social entrepreneurs as the first responders creating social and economic value and sustainable solutions and recovery. Obviously, that's very apropos with Ukraine, where none of us really know what's going to happen, but I think it's fairly obvious that there's going to have to be a major recovery process. And I think that women are probably the key to recovery because they have the extended family values, which are extremely important in rebuilding societies. Hello, Shima. How are you? Do you want to put your mic on? Do you want to put your microphone on? Hello? Oh, well, that worked out well. So Kristin is on first from the
Yes.
feminine perspective on social entrepreneurship. And I think you'd probably say it's a balance between the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah. So thank you, Royston. It's nice to have you. So nice to be with you and to discuss this social entrepreneurship for a better tomorrow. So just a few points. I run an organization called WIN, and we advance and we empower a more feminine, authentic, and global way in the world. Started off with women, but it's more and more including men also as we look for ways to make a world that works for all. And I started this, I saw there were many associations, and WIN is really started as a social entrepreneurship, and I think entrepreneurship is the key today. I think that an entrepreneur has many similarities to an artist. We create things where others might not see anything possible. So that is really nice. And also in environments of social entrepreneurs, there's so much passion and so much inspiration. And I think there is never not something that's not possible. So that's why I think it's really, really important now. And I think when it comes to sustainable recovery, from what I know of many other social entrepreneurs is this mission driven, this meaning driven, this purpose drive, and way of being that makes this type of organizational form and this type of leaders the keys now to the many solutions that the world need. And with this sustainable need we have outside of us, as well as inside of us also. And I think in this case, it's very important that the world wake up to this resource so that we get enough funding, even if it might not be for more profit and better share prices and so on, but really for better human lives and nature and so on. So I think we have to give a lot of value to the social entrepreneur as the artist, the Leonardo da Vinci's of our time. And so, yeah, I think that's what I have to say introductory.
Okay. Well, again, coming back to me, I mean, I'm president of a United Nations NGO out of Geneva, which is focused on building self-sustaining solutions. And having looked at having had a good look at complexity and wicked problems, we find that it's only when you can link health, education, and enterprise together that you get a self-sustaining solution. And that is also by celebrating diversity across and inclusion across all the spectrums of culture and ethnicity. When it comes to social entrepreneurship, it's a very interesting link between the public sector government, the voluntary sector and non-profits, and the private sector and business. When it's all working well, they combine together to provide a secure base. And what we've found is one of the most important things for the evolution of social entrepreneurship is to provide a secure base. Even if it's a perceived secure base, you need an anchor to move forward. And then we are very much around the notion of how do you actually bring empowered individuals together. We know that from, for example, Germany, the Mittelstand is one of the reasons why it's been so resilient in times of crisis, and building this middle market of entrepreneurs is crucial. But what we've found is there needs to be some sort of holographic system that holds it all together. you've got lots of people with ideas, but sometimes they're not always that smart. So you need an ideas incubator. That also, there's people looking at the market. And again, we need to understand need, because there's no point in having an idea if it doesn't represent a parallel need. And again, you need a smart filter to manage that. And finally, in terms of investment, there's lots of money out there, but it's very difficult for it to seek a home. I remind you that the pension funds alone have to find a home for $30 trillion every year. There's a whole mixture of family offices and family investors. By and large, when you're well away from the project, people tend to look at return on investment and risk, but increasingly pension funds, for example, are being asked about social impact. And we had I was at the pension fund conference in Cancun, and the feeling is that maybe 1% of could be allocated to social impact, which is still 300 billion. Now you can see the share prices going all over the place at the moment, and pension funds have to get a return of about 5% minimum. So maybe social impact projects are not so risky as they were once thought. You get virtually no interest return on bank accounts in terms of cash. So if you can start to begin to create this blend of entrepreneurship around a shared vision, and I think to do that, you need to create a fund of funds for investors so that you can balance out return on investment and risk. And then we can start to create a mechanism to rebuild society, particularly when it's been catastrophically damaged or where the investors don't particularly understand the product. They're just looking at a very sort of monochrome view of it. So it's about creating this holographic mechanism to really see what's going on. And we hope that by doing that, you can create self-sustaining solutions. And so the outcome of those is usually relationship with the environment and citizenship as well as wealth. And those outcomes, I think, need to be longitudinal. I mean, one of the problems with investments at the moment, people tend to take a very short-term view of things. I mean, even in the United Nations, they tend to look at, say, 12 months or 18 months, and that's linked, as you know, to the SDG goals. And I think we need to bring together this moral compass as well in terms of investment. So our view is you need to at least to look 3 years ahead as an investment, so you have some idea whether it really works rather than just spinning the wheel like a Chinese plate juggler. So, Linda, would you like to proceed?
Thank you for the opportunity and also to be together with all of you. I have to say that social entrepreneurship has evolved. Some of the things that you just said resonates with me. And what I've been working with startups in Europe now since 2008. And that's evolved in a very conservative market, as you were mentioning, home offices and large companies who have their own inside innovation. And there was always a word about inclusivity, and now the big word, as you just mentioned, but we call it diverse abilities. And diverse abilities is allowing a more inclusive world for those who are physically impaired, for those who have talents but I have certain physical limitations, and who are not inclusive in a lot of things. So I have the great pleasure, as in my background, I started out in particular working we have a family office, we're investors, and then I enjoyed working, mentoring the startups and building it. One startup approached me, and they're called DOT. And I just give you a brief story about DOT. DOT was developed by a Korean who went to study in the United States in Seattle, became a Christian, wanted to evangelize to his roommate who was blind. And the problem is that he wanted to go get a Bible and found out that it was the size of a conference table, and he couldn't find any solution for that. So what he developed was the DOT pad. It is the first of its kind where you can literally, it's like the Kindle for the blind. If that make it simple, it's a Kindle for the blind. But his first product that he developed was a watch, a dot watch, which allows and works with the apps on your phone, which allows the blind person to get messages, able to know the time, text. It's quite innovative, and it's also inexpensive. So that was the first step. The next step is he wanted to create a bearer free opportunity for the blind. And then he realized the people who are deaf also had issues, right? They have their apps, but they have issues. And I have to tell you, I was educated at the moment where there's 17 sign languages, 17, which approach the environment, and they created a kiosk now, and there are POCs in the United States is getting developed as well as here in Europe. And this all began with a problem. And as Eric is a serial entrepreneur, he stopped everything and really focused on developing the dot pad, which now Apple is working exclusively with them. But what I wanted to say was the social impact of what he's doing is he is creating a world for those who cannot see. He's creating opportunities for those who are physically impaired. His manufacturing plants, he has a certain amount of where he only hires physically impaired people, such as blind coders, assembly plant. They're deaf. He's very consistent about that. He sees that there's endless possibilities at your fingertips, and he promotes that literally. And he wants to give the freedom to experience any content in the world in any way, because traveling has always been an impediment for anyone with diverse abilities. Now, going back to the next remark that you talked about, corporate social responsibility. And as you well know, we're here in Europe. There is a very new, or I think it's 2025, that all public spaces infrastructure must have information that's accessible for the physically impaired or diverse abilities. Now, I know the kiosk was developed, and one of the pieces about the kiosk, which is nice, is that if I go to Taiwan, I understand nothing, and I feel handicapped. So the kiosk is also made for languages, not only for the normal traveler, but it also helps you to buy your tickets. So there's possibilities. They also work with the app and also with your phone, so that if I wanted to go to the museum and the kiosk is there, there's a 3D mapping, and I get feedback on the paintings, the Mona Lisa's described. It also helps me to take a picture of me standing at the Eiffel Tower without asking for help, although I'm blind. So there's endless possibilities, and I would really love and suggest that you look at their website, which is .incorp.com. So .incorp.com. And just scroll through that, look at some of the YouTube videos, and you'll see what it's about. But to sum this all up, when you take a young entrepreneur who was passionate about sharing a story with his roommate who was blind, it evolved into something bigger in a relatively short time. It is a young company, and they're moving very forward quickly. Now, jumping into the current crisis here in the Ukraine, there is a program called Lifeline, where a bunch of students and techs, I'm going to call them my startup techies, because I know a lot of them are we know each other. Austria is small, but it also includes people from Germany and the CE region. And what they're doing is they're setting up these logistics to pick up the people at the border so that they have safe passage. Unfortunately, I have to share with you that there is stories of people being robbed, mistreated, and human trafficking. So now what these young talents, these creators have done is created a chip. And they've created the possibility that you can track the pickup point from the pickup point down to the location that they're going to. And it's unfortunate. It is so unfortunate that this situation has actually caused a platform of talents, coders, AI, everything, where they're working so closely together to rescue these people. And this technology will probably be used in the future for travel, for logistics, not for saving lives. And that's another thing that's gone out just is another company called Steady Sense, and they're providing it's like a Band-Aid, but it monitors the temperature of the body. They're providing and donating those to those camps so that doctors are aware of who's ill, who's not ill. They get it on their app. And they're just, and this is another startup, but they are actively engaged, and they were the first ones moving forward. And when you see what's going on here, which is not a good thing in the Ukraine, and you see how quick these startups, these technologies, and they're working together and they're bonding. And what I'm seeing is the social impact of entrepreneurship. These talents are coming up with solutions that will probably make the world not only a better place, but save lives. But in addition to that, they're already working together. What does that mean? Later on down the line, this will become a sustainable business, because business people, as they're building new environments, or in particular in the future when we have to think about how to rebuild the Ukraine, these talents will be able to manage goods, supplies, and so forth. But most importantly, they will offer opportunities, as in the case of DOT, they will offer opportunities to help those who have diverse abilities to have an impact, to participate, because DOT is also supporting with some of their technology. And these, like I said, we have blind coders, but they're active, they can do something, they're earning money, and they have an opportunity. Someone gave them the key, as well as a deaf person. And this is the importance, is getting people with diverse abilities involved in a society, even in a crisis that we're facing here in Europe, as well as worldwide, but making them have meaningful, relevant possibilities to change the world and to be a part of the world.
I think if I could just add to what you said, it's understanding those dimensions from the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions, moving from a command and control system to a participation stroke trust. And I was with the Director General in UNOG a few weeks back, and she said that the one thing she sees in the United Nations as a challenge is the lack of trust and the silos.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing allows us to move away from that. And I think self-respect is the most common denominator that we need to enhance, so that everybody is valuable and everybody is together. Hakan, please, can I introduce you?
Of course, Royston. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Washington Institute for Business, Government, and Society, based in Washington, but we also have offices in Paris, Oxford, Singapore, soon to be in the Middle East and other parts of the world as well. We focus on three things primarily, which is technology innovation, the global economy, and corporate social responsibility. What I'd like to focus on is that CSR aspect, and I loved what was mentioned before by Linda. When it comes to diverse ability, I'm a father of two girls. One of them, the eldest, has some disabilities as well. So this means a lot to me. And what we've been doing at the Washington Institute is actually putting together a significant global sports program. So when we focus on social entrepreneurship, the idea was to look at the unifying aspect of sports. Even now, of course, there was a difficult decision done by our friend, the president of the International Paralympic Committee, Andrew Parsons, who the Paralympian athletes from the Belarus and Russia were just banned from the Paralympics. I think it was a sad moment, but I think it had to be done, right? Because there was so much negative reaction from other athletes as well. But as far as social impact is concerned, one of the areas, again, that we're looking at is kind of how sports is used as a venue of good and how it unifies people, especially during the coronavirus. What we've done is we've looked into, for example, the importance of youth development through sports, both mentally and physically. Recently, I did a fireside chat, like what we call our webinars, with the head of the Rhodes Scholarships, Dr. Keish, and also Tom McMillan, who's a former congressman, NBA player, Olympian. And we really focused on this aspect as well, because our youth, whether here in the U.S. or other parts in the world, really have suffered the consequences of the coronavirus. So how do we bring together? What we did was last September have a global sports conference where we brought different stakeholders together, focusing on gender equity, diversity and inclusion, sports diplomacy, again, as an avenue where we pushed partnering with UNESCO, a fantastic speaker in Gabriela Ramos, who will be attending our next conference in September as well. But right now, what we're focusing on is putting together an impact report on the results of what we learned in September, but also what we're expecting, in Qatar 2022 and moving forward from now on, what needs to be done differently in the area of sports. For example, when Linda mentions diversity in Tokyo, with the Paralympics, with the everything that they had to do with, the Paralympians, it's a legacy project. It's not just for the Paralympians, but it's also used as a tool for an aging society, right? Where they will need more wheelchair ramps, for example, for their metro. So these kind of legacy projects are really important in Tottenham Stadium. Not only are they playing it for football, but also, as we call it in the US, soccer. I mean, football, of course, in Europe and the rest of the world, but American football as well. So again, a legacy project that kind of brings all together. So this impact report, which will be coming out end of May, early June, will be quite important. It will be shared with global stakeholders, members of Congress, sports ministers, and elsewhere. And of course, we'll be sharing with the Horasis community as well. But that, I think, is going to be a different form of social entrepreneurship, where we really focus on private-public partnerships. That's something that we've done, whether it's in sports or elsewhere in cybersecurity, in artificial intelligence, in other areas that we focused on. That, I think, is really important. And I think it's sometimes public-private partnerships that's overplayed. But in this case, I mean, think about our name, Washington Institute for Business, Government, and Society. Without business and government coming together under the umbrella of social entrepreneurship, you can't have the betterment of society, right? It's as simple as that. Now, as far as the Ukraine is concerned and everything that's been happening, Linda and Royston, you've given some great examples. Beyond sports, maybe another soft area that I want to focus on is supplies, food, putting a hot meal in front of people, right? And someone who we're really proud of here in the Washington area is Chef Jose Andres, a Spanish chef who has multiple restaurants here. He has really been pushing social entrepreneurship to the limit. It started with when the Haiti earthquake happened. Way back when, he went there and built like the first kind of solar installations so people could go back to farming again. Now he is in Ukraine, bringing hot meals. I saw him doing a Instagram live with Maria Shriver, where they were raising money at like within 5 minutes. They had raised tens of thousands of dollars to help Ukraine. That to me is the epitome of social entrepreneurship. It's being able to work together, whether you're in the private sector or the business sector, or you're an individual, and how you can bring that to the betterment of society. That to me is a perfect example. It's what's needed. Royston, I'm with you. None of us want this. I think it's, what the world is going through is awful, having gone through 2 years of the coronavirus plus, and then now this war. But I think there might be light at the end of the tunnel if we can work together as business, government, and society. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's the whole message, is finding ways where we can work together and reduce the barriers, whether they're physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual.
Absolutely.
We're very much interested in providing a secure base and recognizing that government funds are always in scarce supply, which started really with the pandemics, because as you're probably aware, there are other viruses out there, some of them that are even worse. So we started down the route of creating a life meal, which is a total food replacement, because the pandemic wave is about 120 days. And if there's no food, then it gets bad very quickly. And therefore, we looked at a meal that could be a sole source of food for up to 100 days, would have a 4-year shelf life and be radiation and waterproof. And then clearly after some of the issues with with COVID, etc., we said that maybe you need to pre-stock it actually in communities rather than actually rely on the distribution train.
Sure.
And then the conclusion that nobody would ever no government will ever pay for it in advance. We then came to the view, why not create a Tom's Shoes model, which is a buy to give. So you sell it retail, and for every one that you sell retail, we match it. is one that's given away, and we're not naive enough to think sending one meal would actually get to the end recipient. So put 300 meals in a box with a water filter that will last 3 years for a family, and an education tablet for the children focused on mothers and children, because we found that if you have strong mothers and children, you have strong communities. And then we developed a system for tracking it, so we can track it anywhere in the world. And then the view was you sell this meal through retail, where it stands on its own merits. It's academic attainment for children by 100%. The elderly who don't tend to eat properly, it provides powerful nutrition, which is a good offset for Alzheimer's dementia. And again, most of us who are on the move tend to eat rubbish, so it tends to deal with that issue. So it's a way of like the Tom's shoes, where you take a retail product that stands on its own rights, and then through a simple QR code mechanism, you actually create a community. And with the education tablet, you can take a picture at the other end, because one of the biggest issues of charities is transparency. I mean, we know this with the UN. You put money in, but you're never quite sure where it goes. And I think most of the philanthropists have a somewhat jaundiced view of this. So if you can create this transparency at all level and promote neighborliness and give the end recipients a secure base, and it doesn't have to be in crisis zones. I volunteered on a food bank in Vevey, which you wouldn't necessarily associate with crisis zone.
Right.
But we saw many, many families who just couldn't survive on the income they had and had to come to a food bank to get food. So what we find is, in terms of neighborliness, bringing people together where they actually work as neighbors to solve problems. And I think this is going to be very much the case in Ukraine. I mean, people of courage need to come together. Hopefully this situation will end at some point. Then the question is, what do you do then? And huge sums of money in aid agencies coming in from the top doesn't always solve the problem. It needs to get more of a bottom-up solution. Also, there's the issue of corruption as well, which is endemic across the world.
I think what's changed from before is that these things are not now done only, through the military, right? And militaries. The economic aspect of it, you can see. I mean, the difference here in Ukraine and Russia is eventually it'll have to come to an end, because you see it from everything from Adidas to everyone else that's now not, wanting to work with Russia, and they've pulled their, sponsorship, for example, of the Russian national team. Russia, of course, has been banned from FIFA and others, so you see again kind of businesses, governments, and others coming together. And we can talk about the merits of, Russia versus other parts of the world. I'm not going to get into kind of some of the hypocrisy of certain things, right? But right now, the world is united, with Ukraine, rightfully. And, but you think, like I remember once when Russia and Turkey was having problems, Russia basically prevented the Russian tourists from going to Turkey. Mm-hmm. And, that's a massive industry in Turkey, right? Tourism is huge. And that impact, that kind of economic impact of it, was far bigger than anything else that back then Putin can do, to Turkey probably on the military. So, I mean, yes, there would have been far many people, more soldiers, and others would have died. But the economic consequences now, I think, even with sanctions, even with SWIFT now, what we're seeing against Russia, I think you can see in the mid to long term, there is going to be an impact.
I'm always conscious that when you're operating on the edge of chaos, which is far more common these days than it was before, it's actually the intangibles that seem to have 80% of the outcomes. And that usually is around people and how people respond. So I use the thoughts of Martin Luther King that says, if you've got darkness, the only thing that will make a difference is light. We know that the military solution, by and large, has never worked. So I'm wondering where the light solution is in this.
That's a good question. I mean, in Austria, it's interesting to see things, because I live in Vienna, but it's interesting to see, which I will tell you, my office is right around the corner where they call it the Golden Mile, and you can imagine our best customers there were the oligarchs and Russians who were going down there. And I have to tell you, it's a very quiet street at the moment, because they don't dare come out. It was very interesting because, there's a certain time of the day when the ladies were coming out, and then, the husbands would be going to the fancy bars that are near my office, and it's still, it's quiet. It is a tragedy. It's unfortunate. It also kind of, when you think about it, history constantly repeats yourself. The only thing is there's some really bad toys up there that somebody has access to that is concerning, not so much about we have to rebuild the country, as long as he doesn't activate the reactors over there. And that's more of the concern that we have here and nearby, and why the people are fleeing as quickly as they can, because they're terrified. They're terrified. And when you talk to the children here in Austria, because they understand. I mean, I have 5 daughters, Hakan, so I have a big family, 5 girls.
Wow.
I try
You
for
win an argument.
God bless you. God bless you. That is
the mothership. I have 5 girls and 5, we say 5 daughter companies, or have very diverse fields. But I have grandchildren, and they're 10, and there's 2 10-year-olds. One's a boy, one's a girl. And my grandson says, "Nona, what kind of world is this going to be? This is really scary." And because he's aware of what's going on. He knows how close Austria is to the borders up there. And how do you answer a question like that? I always tell him, I said, there's a lot more good people than there are ugly people. And he was the one, he says, "I know, Nona, but if someone has the right to push the wrong button, then what happens?" It's a point. We can, I want to believe that we can help the Ukrainians rebuild, and, managing to take logistics and delivers things that need to be up there. But we also have to be very well aware what happens to the rest of the countries and the rest of the world.
I think it's about taking personal responsibility at the end of the day. I mean, I'm reminded of the nuclear test plan, which was actually, interestingly, came from women taking the baby teeth of children and looking at the strontium-90 levels. And that actually was the major driving force behind the test bans. So I think we need to understand how we can use these subtle energies of people and drive change from the grassroots. I would value your thoughts on how do we create social entrepreneurship after crisis.
I think we're actually seeing it.
Yeah.
I mean, the world is far more, there's the good and the bad, right? In technology and innovation, and, we look at what's happened with so many of the companies in the US and even the elections process and everything else. But even from TikTok to other places, the images that we're seeing firsthand very quickly I think that's, again, a game changer, and bringing societies together, businesses together, governments together, individuals together, to see and be able to make, look, again, is the United States and NATO going to come to the defense of Ukraine? Probably not. It's obvious that that's not going to happen. Is President Putin hopefully going to stop there and doesn't become, broader, NATO, for example, war, etc.? It doesn't appear that way, but one can never know. But I think we're seeing, Oysten, to your point, like we are seeing that already happen. And again, from all these companies and others who are taking action, the world is quite united in this, at least. I mean, barring, some of the other state actors who, we don't need to get into, but, you can see it already happening from a grassroots level. And again, like I mentioned, Jose Andres, who goes over there and does this. Businesses, Linda mentioned the companies that are already involved. I mean, imagine in the midst of all of this that there are still people out there who would think about, human trafficking. I mean, how disgusting is that?
I just can't wrap my head around. But one thing I would tell you, that what I know, because as I said, I'm sort of like in the financial district here in Vienna, is seeing how swift. I mean, Austria's always neutral, and that there's quite a few Austrian companies that do a lot of business in the Ukraine and in Russia. And the fact that and you have to imagine, we have a bank here called Raiffeisen International Bank. They're big in Russia. And they had to pull the plug. They said no. And it was quite surprising that they actually said no. Not today, not tomorrow. No, and I'm not joking that the Russians are hiding. You don't see them anymore because they're very, they love their brands and they love to make sure that everybody knows that there's spilling money here left and right. You don't see them anymore. They're quiet. They're quiet. The Russian Austrian society completely disbanded and crashed because they had some people who are not supposed to be there. Let's put it. And for me, I've been laughing and I'm watching this, but I think, as you said earlier, we are coming together not only from the grassroots, which has always been the case where people jump in, but what I see from the financials, from the investments, from the larger companies who, are not going to be happy. There's going to have to be a recovery for all this business that was lost, supplying for oil, new ways to provide electricity, whether it's getting those solar and windmills up and running in Germany, whatever it is, they're working on it now. My husband's in the energy, so I can share that. I know everybody's working on that to make sure. What I see coming is the technology, but also these startups are going to come up with solutions where maybe, and this is my prayer, that we don't need to be beholden to someone to supply energy to countries in Europe. I think that needs to change, and by changing that, you also create a better environment. So that could be also a social impact if we think about moving forward in the future, is coming up with clean tech, green tech, bringing these talents together to develop, maybe creating an institute, I call it a brain institute, but just focus on bringing in the top talents to sit down and come up with solutions so that if we survive this, that this never happens again. Because it is the importance, is the technology, and that I would like to see. I would invest in that. It had to create some sort of brain pool or institute. You're the expert over there, but just focused on clean tech, clean energy, and I'm good at raising money. That I've done it professionally, but I'm also when it's something that's important, bringing these young talents and to be orchestrated. I'm going to say orchestrated. You need a conductor, but the conductor needs to be someone that's senior enough, someone like yourself, like both of you, senior enough, who can inspire, manage, and mentor these talents to make a better world. That I would put my finger in the fire, as they say in Austria, to do something like that. I mentor all the time, and I mean, as I said, these young kids who are calling me and say, "Oh, we've got this idea," and I flip it over to another young kid, and it just grew in a matter of a week. And I started thinking about it. Why don't we have a brain pool? Why can't we create a brain pool? Maybe Washington, Switzerland.
Yep.
I can ground it here in Austria. And because these young talents, they are they want to make an impact. Of course, they want to make money. They're positive. They're not dum-dums. I'm going to tell you that's the difference from the old days when we had NGOs and I would be out there knocking on doors and say, "Could I have 100,000 euros for this?" They look at me like, it's not a sustainable model, just living off of fundraising. I mean, donations.
Right.
And these kids, for the example, like Dot or the other ones, they created a possibility to make enough money to support their business, to grow their business, but also at the same time, they're donating Dot watches. If you know people in Washington that would like to have a Dot watch and you want to see it, I'll send it to both. I'll send it also to Switzerland and donate it. That's how we're passing the message. And that's relevant for this company. And there's a lot of other companies. Water technology. I know what kids that have done water technology.
Well, there's a company in Washington, not Washington, but in the U.S., Warby Parker, that does all the glasses.
There you go.
They're two Harvard grads, and they
It-
donate quite a bit of the proceeds of every pair of glasses that you buy. So
Absolutely.
it's real social impact and social
Just
entrepreneurship.
like just like the watches, but going back to this brain pool, if I had a wish and you guys were both of you were my Santa Claus,
Yeah,
I would say, please let's make a brain pool. Let's take 10 talents who are committed.
I like it.
What would be the takeaways from this? The takeaway is that we as the more, I hate to use the word because I'm still a woman. I hate to say it, but the more seasoned people in life, that we will be the mentors, the guides to help them learn from history. Because only I still remember in the States when we used to have the bomb siren.
Shelters. Yeah.
And not only that, we used to have to jump under the first Friday of the month. We had to jump underneath the desk because that was the time when when they directed the
Yeah.
over here. So I remember that. Telling my kids that they think I'm nuts, but now they're saying, "Hey, mom, it's true." But if we can remind them the history, personal impact, that we can also tell them as entrepreneurs and people who we are. I mean, I do have a other life. I mean, I still have that business life, but it's not my focus anymore because I'm more involved about the next. I'm concerned about the next generation and
Same.
building that generation. So I'm devoted to spending my time, my network, my resources to build that. And I would love to do and one thing that I would guard upon, I don't know how it is, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but my experience in Europe is if you get university professors, forget it. Just forget it.
Very true.
It's a killer. It's a killer. It has to be people who are committed. Um, Personal gain is not there. We don't need it. We just want to get it up and running because these kids can smell personal gain. They're so clever. But if they know and they see the sincerity, they will do everything to make it work. And I would challenge them to come up. The first challenge is to come up with a way to create this brain pool. I'm just Greek. I guess this working title as I'm brainstorming with you. I would challenge them to come up with 5 points. First of all, business plan. 2, what is their vision for their future to make it a better world? 3, how can they create a platform that other startups who are interested in social entrepreneurship want to be a benefit? And this platform, they can make it themselves. So, this is the one thing when I hear about platforms and I know how these kids operate, young people operate, they can make their own platform in 15 minutes and they can get up to thousands. But
Yes.
I think it needs to just be structured, and it's not a big expense. The goal is to create a brain pool of meaningful, relevant, seasoned people who are committed to the same purpose of helping these young people develop meaningful and purpose driven technology to make it an all inclusive world. So we don't use the word diverse abilities. I was telling this to Eric because I coined it with him. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you about diverse abilities. I don't like the word, but we're going to use the word until everybody is inclusive. I'm so tired of diversity and every time let's use diverse abilities, and then someday we don't need to use the word. Everything is better.
You know what it is, Linda? It's almost like having the business roundtable, but this time for like a brain pool roundtable idea, and where they can actually meet frequently, come up with these kind of impact driven kind of results rather than just
Sure.
for us. Like one of the things that we're allergic to at the institute is just to convene. Convening is fantastic, but what comes out of it?
Well, that would be
Absolutely.
and see, that's the importance of having seasoned people. So for example, if I was to get 5 corporates to use that technology, whether it's producing for solar, wind, to take that technology or to use their AI, whatever it is, and we get them to become mentors, it doesn't cost them anything. They're going to be happy to get some free tech and then also supply their CSR, which you're more of an expert on. So if you can imagine how great would that be? Because by accident, we 3 would be introducing a different brain set to the corporate world, to the blue chip companies, right?
I'm afraid we've actually come to time by the looks of it. I think my view was the incubator, the accelerator, and the fund of funds, with an entrepreneurial hub in the middle of seasoned people. The main thing is to make sure you have smart filters, because you've all seen the daft ideas and the daft market needs and the daft money. So trying to keep it sensible so that you have something that really works. I think that is the key for social entrepreneurship.
I think that it was a great opportunity to just sit and chat and to share. And you guys have my emails. If you want to get back to me.
Well, why don't we set up a Zoom call when we're?
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that.
We can do another brainstorming.
Yeah, and then Linda, let's get together in Washington too when you're here.
I was going to tell Eric, the CEO from DOT, will be in Washington before I am next week. So maybe I will send him an email.
Please. Always welcome.
And I'll send you a DOT watch. I'll send you both, get you both DOT watches so you can take a look at it, and then we'll continue.
And don't forget the family offices, and some of the families are very large.
I saw that.
So
I'll follow up with you, definitely. We will be all involved and do something, a good thing. I think this was actually the best panel I've ever been on, because we did a brainstorming. So you see, you're guilty of that, sir. When you get all these ideas, now he's going to go in the fetal dark office and dark corner and go to the fetal position. We've overwhelmed him.
Well, take the recording and play it back to them. That's one way to stir up change.
Well, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure to be with both of you today.
I'm really delighted, and I'll be in touch, and we'll have a conversation very soon, if not see each other in person. And I'm just hopping away to your place in Zurich, and you can always come to Vienna anytime.
It's great. Well, I have a soft spot in Vienna, shall we say, because I remember the museums and the fabulous city.
It is. It's fun.
It is, and I haven't been in a long time, so I'll come visit at some point as well.
Oh, please do, and bring your families. I'm a good tour guide.
I'd love that.
Okay.
I'd love that.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Be safe.
Have a great weekend too. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.